Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. And this is Francis Bacon and His Secret Empire by Manly P. Hall. An article taken from Horizon, the magazine of useful and intelligent living. Volume 6, Number 1, Summer 1946. Francis Bacon and His Secret Empire by Manly P. Hall. A good number of intelligent and enthusiastic writers have turned their attention to the Shakespeare-Bacon controversy. The subject is one which intrigues the mind and sharpens the wits. We are all fascinated by a mystery, and this celebrated controversy presents a confusion of clues and intimations without parallel in the history of human thinking. One of the difficulties seems to be that we become so clue-conscious that little energy or time remains for the consideration of conclusions. We have lost the ends in a maze of means. From a critical study of available evidence, it is reasonably plain that the man whom we have lovingly remembered as William Shakespeare could not have written the plays and sonnets associated with his name. Also, there is reasonable proof, at least circumstantial, to indicate that Sir Francis Bacon could have written the plays. It requires only a little additional enthusiasm to affirm categorically that Bacon was the master poet and deserves the bays now worn by the Stratford householder. Certainly no other contestant has been produced whose claims can be more adequately sustained. For present argument, therefore, let us assume that Sir Francis Bacon, Baron of Verulam and Viscount of St. Albans, England's High Chancellor, was the secret poet. If it seems that by this assumption we have accomplished a triumph, it may be profitable to examine the substance of this victory to see to what degree we have furthered the cause of our own inquiry. If we may depend upon the none too brilliant light of history, it would appear that our man, Bacon, was devoted to a variety of causes and activities requiring much thought and a considerable expenditure of time. He combined the practice of law and the burdens of public office with extensive theory about physics and metaphysics in an intensive literary program. In addition, he found time to dabble in horticulture to the degree of planning the gardens for the Inns of Court and the landscaping of his own estates. He maintained such a voluminous correspondence that it is said he received and wrote more letters than the King of England. Yet with all these industries, he found appropriate time for piety and maintained himself amidst the confusion of court life, reserving some hours to himself that he might take his favorite rides in an open carriage through the English countryside. In summary, it may be observed that his lordship was a busy man. It is reported that it is the busy man who has the most time. And if Bacon organized his personal activities as efficiently as he organized the learning of his time in his philosophical writings, it is possible that he could have written the extensive body of dramatic works now known as the Shakespearean plays. Whereas another man must have engaged in extensive research to perform such a labor, his lordship had the necessary information readily available. It remained only to select a form appropriate to the matter. But now the Baconians succeed in complicating Bacon's activities to a degree almost beyond calculation. They would have us believe that his lordship built into his writings an intricate network of codes, ciphers, and clues which must have multiplied the original labor 1,000-fold. There are count ciphers, biliteral alphabets, wheel ciphers, K-ciphers, acrostics, and a score of others. Here also the engravers surely had a strife. Title pages were designed with secret meanings, vignettes and colophons were variously fashioned, and even the watermarks in the paper were given consideration. If the literary implications are prodigious, the typesetter's problems would have led less stolid men to madness. Editing a manuscript of several hundred pages laden with intentional errors, mispaged for a purpose, mispunctuated and misspelled with subtle design, in two kinds of type differing only in microscopic details, all this and much more staggers the imagination. Although the faculty of ingenuity works rapidly, the technical difficulties associated with interpreting an elaborate scheme in terms of type and printer's ink involves an extensive time element. Books by Bacon and works of other authors containing his ciphers were not produced by one printer. Some were published in England and others on the continent. This necessitated training and supervising a number of typesetters and doing an incredible amount of proofreading. Codes which require a lifetime of tracing through old folios and quartos were not easily or quickly introduced into the text. In addition to the mind behind the plan, there was a mechanical problem requiring years to work out. We cannot deny the existence of the codes, so we must assume the technical problem which they imply. We see dimly a considerable group of persons diligently engaged in creating, producing, checking, and verifying the intricate pattern of the concealed text. This was either a labor of love or a work which was financed by a deep and adequate purse. It is utterly impossible that Bacon could have accomplished all this without trained assistance and the cooperation of persons of many ranks, trades, and abilities. But as Hamlet observed, there's the rub. Personally, I cannot conceive a man of Bacon's intelligence and industry devoting his life to an elaborate scheme of this kind to accomplish the purposes usually associated with the undertaking. The majority of Baconians assume that Bacon's intent was twofold. First, to prove that he was the legitimate heir to the throne of England, and second, that he was the author of the Shakespearean plays and certain other literary productions attributed to other writers. It seems to me that by this line of thinking we have an outstanding example of a mountain giving birth to a mouse. Let us assume, since for the moment we are inclined to assumption, that Bacon did wish to perpetuate the fact that he was the son of Queen Elizabeth and the Earl of Leicester, and was therefore Francis Tudor, Prince of Wales. This might have galled a man of lesser mind, and it is possible that Lord Bacon was perturbed by the unfairness of the situation. He might also have desired that posterity should discover his true station. We might even allow that in a spare moment he would incorporate this information into his writings by one of a variety of ciphers with which he was acknowledgedly familiar. But it seems to me this makes an end of it. According to the Baconians, a large group of co-workers must have been party to his secret. Why not trust the secret to them, forthright? The documents proving the fact were no more dangerous than the assortment of printers' devils who must have had some suspicion of the type designs which they were employed to create. Bacon was sufficiently informed concerning the passing glory of the world to have realized that the attainment of a throne, had it been possible, was the lesser end of living. The elaborate use of ciphers would imply that he had no hope for the crown himself. He left the facts to future ages. Why then this incredible industry which could lead to nothing but the satisfaction of vanity? It might have been different if his lordship had been minded to create a dynasty which would require the absolute proof of his own legal descent, but here again the motive fails. Bacon died without legal issue, his claims died with him, and the elaborate justification was to no purpose. I cannot imagine Lord Bacon doing anything without purpose. It was not his type of mind. Then arises the problem of the Stratford rustic. If Bacon wrote the plays ascribed to Shakespeare, and I am inclined to think he did, a simple cipher, and 2 hours of work would have perpetuated this fact neatly and beyond controversy. It was hardly necessary to resort to an infinite number of crisscrossings through hundreds of pages of the great folio to describe in detail a point triumphantly discovered by Ignatius Donnelly, that the Stratford Shakespeare had a large wen on the side of his neck. For some reason, the discovery of this wen leaves me cold when I remember Bacon's regret that time was not sufficient for him to complete his revision of the common law of England. Again, many men were party to Bacon's abilities as a secret poet. He could easily have trusted them to reveal this at a proper time. He had already given them the power to destroy him had they been so minded, because they had the keys to his cipher. The Baconians have left us dangling ingloriously upon the horns of a dilemma. They have taken away our Shakespeare, who could not write the plays for lack of ability, and given us instead Bacon, who would not have deluged posterity with such a confusion because he had too much ability. Nor can we find much justification in the psychological refuge that his lordship was an advanced neurotic. There is no indication that Bacon ever suffered from any mental deterioration. He probably had psychoses appropriate to his time and station, but there is nothing to indicate that his mind dissolved before his body. In solving one riddle, we have been given another infinitely more difficult of solution. What are the facts? First, the codes and ciphers are there. Second, they all trace back to Bacon. Third, the decoded material all refers to Bacon. Fourth, the decoded texts add little to the sum of human knowledge and contain no information which could not have been perpetuated in a more simple manner. There are some exceptions to our classifications, but they have not been followed through. These exceptions center around Bacon's association with early Freemasonry. Perhaps this was the part which should have received the greater attention. The type of mind that has heretofore dabbled in the Bacon ciphers has been largely interested in the authorship of the plays, and was therefore hypersensitive to this issue alone. Were there more philosophers among the Baconians, they might have found more philosophy in the secret text. Great motions in nature lead to great consequences. The Baconian code is probably the greatest motion in literature. It must lead somewhere. It must justify the incredible energy and patience required to build it into the fabric of early 17th century literature. In cipher writing, it is common to conceal one cipher within another as a further protection against discovery. Once the superficial code has been broken and a story apparently of sufficient importance has been discovered, the decoder is likely to rest upon his laurels. Bacon himself reports on the concealment of words within words. In this respect, the Shakespeare Bacon. Bacon Tudor landmarks could well be the indicators of the whereabouts of the true and significant cipher. Bacon's mind was wholly devoted to essential learning. He was resolved to lay the footing of a philosophic empire in the world. This dedication of spirit and purpose might impel to an elaborate program of concealment not directed against any person or time, but against premature discovery in which greatness of knowledge should exceed greatness of integrity. If Bacon believed that he had made certain discoveries out of time, that is, ahead of the maturity of human institutions, he might well have followed in the footsteps of another who bore the same name. Centuries earlier, Roger Bacon, the Benedictine monk, had concealed a variety of scientific discoveries by the use of an ingenious code. If the end justified the means, Bacon would have gone to any length to accomplish his purpose. He could also have gathered about him the best intellects of his time. If he could convey to them his dream, they would have labored with him for its accomplishment. But this dream certainly was not a resolution that future ages should discover by tedious decipherment the irrelevant fact that at one time, Willie Shakespeare was in bloom. In this situation, we must rescue Bacon from a kind of honor which tears down his intelligence, while it builds up his reputation. Perhaps it would be helpful to examine more closely the texts of his writings and those attributed to him, to inspect this mind which was the greatest ornament of its age. Such examination impresses us with the rather obvious fact that Bacon knew far more than he ever wrote. His books are from a source greater than the man. They reveal a knowledge of universals in itself never defined, but everywhere manifest. We catch glimpses of Bacon as the master of magic, the Prospero standing in the midst of the tempest raging on the enchanted isle, the isle itself being England. Here's the Kabbalist dealing in secret arts, the astrologer seeking the mystery of planetary energies, the alchemist laboring toward the transmutation of the human state. Through the writings of Bacon, especially those unacknowledged, flow the streams of an old wisdom. Through his pen, Plato, Pythagoras, and the old Greeks found a new release. All knowledge was his province, and especially that secret knowledge of causes. Is this a man, then, to scramble at great length his matchless skill in words, to reveal in the end that Queen Elizabeth was given to foibles? In decoding Bacon, we must seek the keys to his ciphers, not only in his writings, but in the man himself. Perchance it is the man who is the greatest riddle of all. If Shakespeare masks Bacon, is it not possible that Bacon uses his own identity to mask a deeper secret? Is the whole masquerade part of an elaborate program of concealment? If so, the substance concealed must be of the greatest weight and moment. The history of the esoteric tradition, which has descended from remote ages through an order of initiated adepts and disciples, is an elaborate pageantry of concealment. This submergence of sublime truths in symbols, fables, and emblems was not motivated by a desire to prevent the spread of knowledge. The true motive was to prevent the perversion and misuse by the ignorant of that divine magic which is grounded in the knowledge of causes. The present dilemma caused by the release of the secrets of atomic energy is an admirable case in point. We have become aware of a universal power, but we have no adequate internal awareness of right use. Atomic energy is but one small aspect of universal power. The human being must be conditioned ethically, morally, and spiritually before he can be entrusted with the secrets of his own existence. This obvious truth justifies the elaborate machinery of concealment used by the ancient mystery schools to prevent the general dissemination of the esoteric tradition. For such a reason as this, Bacon might have followed those precedents founded on experience and developed an elaborate mechanism to preserve and yet conceal certain discoveries which he regarded as too dangerous to be incorporated into the structure of the Instauratio Magna. There's also another less esoteric but more practical consideration. This is the conflict between present and ultimate good. Bacon's position as a leader in the intellectual world would have been hazarded had he committed himself outwardly to a program of transcendentalism. He could benefit by the experience of Paracelsus, with whose writings he was well acquainted, as proved by his quotations. Paracelsus caused such a tempest to descend upon his own head by his frankness that the sphere of his influence, both immediate and remote, was seriously damaged. Bacon, the scientist, the philosopher, the jurist, the statesman, and the man of letters, was widely accepted and generally honored. All this preferment would have been swept away had the world discovered that its great intellectual was given to occult arts and practices. In this way, the present good would have been sacrificed, and wisdom would have been martyred to popular bigotry and prejudice. But the remote good must also be considered. This larger virtue in learning was acceptable to only a small group of advanced idealists, and this minority could not be left unnourished. These faithful pens, who offered themselves to the ready writer, required a special kind of sustenance. It was not difficult for Bacon to appear as two men. One served the need of the moment and the other the need of the ages. Have we ever explored the true depths of Lord Bacon's genius? Has he composed for us another fable in which all the persons and elements of the famous Shakespeare-Bacon controversy are parts of a curious philosophical symbolism? There is ample precedence for such a policy in the elaborate mythology of the Greeks, who transformed persons into principles and principles into persons, combining these factors in extravagant fantasies the more ably to conceal simple facts. As Plato adapted Socrates to the purposes of his own discourses, speaking his own words through the lips of another, Bacon could have made use of the Stratford actor. Although Socrates was a real person, the Socrates of the Platonic dialogues is primarily a symbol. He was a man of humble origin and eccentric disposition, in bodily appearance grotesque. He is Plato's shadow, an intellectual fragment set aside in the consciousness of the master to serve a particular purpose. It was most convenient to the concealment of the true intent that there was a real Socrates, and that an intimate connection existed between the two men. Those unacquainted with Plato's secret design were entirely satisfied to assume that Socrates was being perpetuated in the writings of his great disciple. Now consider Bacon and his inward resolve to shake Minerva's spear in the face of prevailing ignorance. He creates the character of Will Shakespeare, which sounds very much as though it meant, "I will shake the spear." It is most convenient that a humble member of a theatrical troupe should have a name remotely similar. It might be still more convenient to purchase the name and service of this man, the agreement being that, for a consideration, the actor would depart from London, leaving a slight but sufficient trail which could be followed to no profit. In the meantime, the wits who had gathered in London manufactured a new Shakespeare who never existed except in the subtle stuff of mind. This precious mask was vitalized sufficiently to have a public existence, if no private life. The tragic muse at work, or Shakespeare writes another play. Max Beerbohm, English writer and caricaturist, enjoyed an intimate knowledge of the English theatre. He was the half-brother of the celebrated Shakespearean actor Sir Herbert Beerbohm Tree. In this delightful caricature, he expresses his personal convictions about the authorship of the Shakespearean plays. Lord Bacon is represented surreptitiously, slipping the manuscript of Hamlet to the Stratford actor, whose expression indicates that he is about to produce immortal drama. The setting is Bacon's home, for his lordship's crest appears above the window. His name was appended to works previously published anonymously, and he gathered quite a reputation which increased to the degree that the Stratford actor decreased. There's even a question as to whether Will Shakespeare of Stratford ever heard of the William Shakespeare of London, for this name did not appear on any of the plays until after the actor had returned to Stratford. Certainly, the acquaintance was slight, if it existed at all. No one ever met the William Shakespeare of the drama. They could not, for he was only an image, a phantom, bred of a strategy and destined for intellectual immortality. Now, consider what has happened. Subsequent ages, to honor their Shakespeare, have made pilgrimage to the shrine of the Stratford actor and have pieced together from time to time the evidence of his intellectual deficiency. It gradually dawns upon the mind that the genius they seek is not entombed in the Stratford church. Unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, the trail leads from Stratford to St. Albans, and Lord Bacon is convicted of authorship by circumstantial evidence. Thus, stimulated and intrigued, the mind seeks proof and falls conveniently upon the cipher. By decoding these, more evidence is added to the previous conviction, and the mind complacently accepts the accuracy of its own conclusion. This settles the matter. The hoax is uncovered and nothing remains but to gather up additional fragments calculated to conclude the case. Thus, Francis Bacon's relationships with Willie Shakespeare are settled, at least for Baconians. But this is not the end of the confusion. William Shakespeare of London remains unsolved unless we are willing to accept this identification with one of the other two. This doesn't satisfy the requirements of the case. Who is this William Shakespeare, or possibly what is he? And why has it been inconvenient to ignore his existence as a separate factor in the problem? Let us seek precedent. About the time, 1610 AD, that Bacon appears to have been masquerading behind his Shakespeare mask, another pseudo-historical personality was attracting wide attention. Strangely enough, this other mysterious character has also been traced, at least by some, to Bacon's doorstep. This new elusive character was the mysterious founder of the Rosy Cross. He appears first simply as our illustrious father, CRC. Later, about 1616, CRC is given the complete name Christian Rosenkreutz, although the early manifestos themselves assure us that the name is fictitious. CRC is supposed to have flourished about 200 years earlier and to have lived to the ripe age of 106 years. He traveled extensively and later, returning to Germany, established the fraternity which bore his name. A rather complete personal history was built for him, but no historical records have ever been found to bear out any part of the story. Wilkins, in his Mathematical Magic, tells us that CRC's first name was Francis, and Robert Burton, in his Anatomy of Melancholy, a curious work of the 17th century, says that CRC was at that time still alive. This, in spite of the fact that the venerable adept was reported in the original manifestos to have been dead 120 years. It requires only a superficial reading of the early Rosicrucian texts to show that CRC is a symbol of the esoteric tradition itself and an integral part of the doctrine which he is supposed to have created. It would be interesting to know whether or not CRC was another of Bacon's masks, but even this would not solve anything. The question is not who was he, but what does he represent? Somewhere about this time, another intriguing fable took the appearance of fact. Freemasonry was emerging with the story of its martyred builder, Hiram Abiff. This Hiram was developed from a brief and comparatively substanceless reference in the Bible to a builder who assisted in the building of Solomon's temple. In the Masonic legend, Hiram takes on considerable substance and from a shadow becomes a man of history with a variety of activities. Here again, Bacon's connection with the early development of Freemasonic symbolism compels our thoughtfulness. Yet I'm certain that the average Freemason of today realizes that the chiram of the ritual is important as a symbol rather than a person whose life history hangs on so slender a thread. Yet I am certain that the average Freemason of today realizes that the chiram of the ritual is important as a symbol rather than a person whose life history hangs on so slender a thread. It also seems certain that the ethical cause of Freemasonry would not be greatly advanced if by chance more of the historical Hiram could be rescued from the oblivion of ages. He represents powers eternal in the spirit, timeless, and in no way dependent upon the limitations of historical recording. In the Novum Organum, Bacon refers to three kinds of idols. He calls these idols of the marketplace, idols of the cave, and idols of the theatre. These idols are false appearances which deceive the mind. Could his lordship have been referring to certain images or appearances which he himself had set up in different departments of life? The idols of the marketplace are current fallacies sustained by popular tradition. This sounds a bit as though it described the Shakespeare myth, for the Stratford actor certainly engaged in buying, selling, and bartering. The idols of the cave are deep subconscious things hidden in the recesses of the intellect. Could this cavern be the vaulted tomb of the secret adept of the Rosy Cross? The idols of the theatre are symbols or appearances parading upon a stage or acting out a drama. Is this a reference to the initiatory ritual of Freemasonry in which the members of the lodge personify certain ancient and honorable masters of their lodge? The noblest Roman of them all. This curious figure occurs in Seleniana Augustalia by Johann Valentin Andrea. The book was published in 1643 and dedicated to the Dukes of Brunswick-Luneburg. It should be remembered that Augustus, Duke of Brunswick-Luneburg, is believed to have been the author of the celebrated book on ciphers, published in 1624. This book contains all the codes used in the great folio of Shakespeare, which had been published the year previously. Thus, all of these elements fit together to create a definite pattern. Page 38 shows the figure of a three-headed man, in appearance exactly like the figure in one of the books with which Bacon is said to have tampered. Remember also that the Roman soldier is one of the supporters of Bacon's crest. As Lord of Verulam, his titles covered an ancient Roman city famous in the legendary of England. Our Roman soldier is interesting not only for his 3 faces and 6 arms, but especially for his legs, with their variety of footwear. It will also be noticed that each of the feet is associated with a panel of the pedestal. These panels contain a variety of symbols which have a relationship to the implements and objects held in the hands. Beginning at the left, the first foot wears a scholar's slipper. The corresponding hand holds a torch, and on the pedestal is an incense burner. Together, these are symbols of enlightenment and spiritual conviction. The second foot wears an actor's boot with spur, Shakespeare. The hand holds a book lighted by the torch, and on the pedestal are crossed weapons upon a shield, perchance cross purposes. The third foot wears the legging of a Roman magistrate. The hand holds an anchor and rope symbolizing security, a strong anchorage. And on the pedestal is what looks suspiciously like Bacon's hat and the collar of the chancellorship. Perhaps a wreath is intended. Here the lawmaker is revealed for our consideration. The fourth leg wears the legging of a Roman soldier and a length of chain. The next arm, lower right, holds symbols of mortality, the grave digger's spade, etc. On the pedestal are emblems of martyrdom, the sword, the scourge, and the whip. These may well represent St. Alban, the martyred Roman soldier from whom Bacon's estates of St. Alban received their name. Here are the symbols of his lordship's martyrdom, as recorded in history in his fall from chancellorship to save the honor of his king. The fifth is Bacon's very own and corresponds with the attire of a courtier, including the large rosette, shoe buckle identical with that appearing upon his figure beside his tomb in the church at St. Albans. Note church at rear left. The corresponding hand holds a rod or scepter, symbol of nobility. The design on the pedestal is curiously obscure, but suggests a Masonic compass with rule and square. The last foot is without covering, to represent humility and submission to the will of God in all things. The corresponding hand holds the tablet of the Mosaic law, and on the pedestal are hands clasped in prayer. It would be difficult to compose a more intriguing rebus to represent the various persons of a man who in his day played many parts. But why has not our Roman soldier a fourth face, that of his lordship in proper person? Perhaps he has, on the side not visible in the engraving, or perhaps the hidden master had no desire to be recognized apart from his masks. 3 false faces and no true likeness anywhere. Comedy, tragedy, and the poetic muse are now to serious business. In this respect, we may gain greater insight from the larger patterns of Bacon's purposes than from recourse to any secret cipher. Our task is to discover a motive great enough to justify this majestic subterfuge. The Bacon that no man knows is the man we seek amidst the confusion which he created about himself. The Rosicrucians described their sacred temple, the Domus Spiritus Sanctus, as standing upon a high mountain concealed from the sight of the profane by dense clouds. These clouds are the confusions of false appearances by which sacred matters preserved themselves. Concealed behind these clouds is the Generalissimo of the world, the secret master, the heir of the ages. We know that Bacon was dedicated to a universal reformation. He was resolved to set up a machinery toward the end of the philosophic empire. He sought to perfect nature through art. He said that he had rung the bell that brought the wits together. Bacon was endowed with not only an extraordinary mind, but with a peculiar majesty of person. It is often reported of him that his very presence inspired the deepest veneration. He radiated power, power disciplined by reason and brought to the service of a universal vision. His lordship knew that there could be no reformation for man apart from the reformation of man. The human estate must be enlarged and enriched, not by accident, but by intent. A pattern must be set up to guide humanity from within its own fabric. The wise man's world and the whole utopian dream must have a beginning in time, as well as an existence in eternity. Nature works to the ultimate perfection of all things, but man has the faculties available to hasten the works of nature. This anticipation of natural intent and the furtherance of that intent is the highest form of art. Bacon's purpose was to create a world within a world, an internal sphere within an external state. This hidden empire should have secret but sufficient substance. It should have laws and secret habitations, should be populated by a race of creative spirits, and should survive as a hidden but ever-present force until such time as nature could bring forth her mystery. A thoughtful consideration of contemporary literature reveals the general pattern to those who have the mind to see and interpret the riddle of the English Sphinx. Thus came into being the empire of the concealed poets, the secret commonwealth of the wise. Poetry is not only art in literature, but the whole structure of art itself. Here, art is used as an antonym for accident. Bacon's philosophic empire was the empire of intent, all things done for purpose and toward purpose, a gradual growth of wisdom, with all its implications, religious, philosophic, scientific, industrial, and political. Art is planned existence. It is the dedication of faculties and abilities to their legitimate ends, the perfection of the human state and the revelation of the divine purpose. Others had dreamed of a paradise to come when human conduct could sustain a civilized state. Bacon realized that a general political reform by which nations would spontaneously emerge into a condition of integrity was impossible. But in every age and among all peoples, there are some who have already emerged and are births out of time. In this regard, the philosophic empire already exists. These isolated thinkers must be drawn together and from their own state, not in visible conflict with their times, but in an invisible concord with those universal principles which forever move through time. It seems unnecessary to burden this brief survey of a very large subject with numerous references to books or manuscripts not easily accessible to the average reader. Those who have studied the Baconian problem are well acquainted with the 17th century literature leering upon the subject. The story which I shall attempt to piece together is available, however, to anyone who has a mind for research. We shall content ourselves with a simple narration of the account. Between the years 1610 to 1670, a number of books, pamphlets, engraving and woodcuts appeared, referring in a variety of ways to an assemblage of poets secretly convening on the slopes of Mount Parnassus. In Greek mythology, the oracle of the Delphic Apollo was located in this vicinity, and from the chimney-like vent of the oracle ascended the fumes of ecstasy. The priestess of the oracle, seated upon a golden tripod above the vent, was entranced by these fumes and delivered the words of the god in hexameter verse. It should not be supposed that the Parnassus described in the curious books and pamphlets of the 17th century referred literally to the Grecian oracle. The references are to a new Parnassus, an invisible mountain for poets, where the servants of Apollo gathered to receive the precious words of their secret master. According to George Withers, Francis Bacon, Baron of Verulam, was the High Chancellor of Parnassus, and in the Great Assizes, he, as Minister of his state, speaks for the god Apollo. Withers also gives us the names of other members of the poetic commonwealth with their stations and degrees. Incidentally, Shakespeare is mentioned among the lesser officials of the poetic empire, his office being Keeper of Weekly Accounts. It is evident that the Parnassian assembly was a kind of Masonic lodge with a Grand Master and an executive body totaling 33 men. These men had their marks or symbols consisting of what is called, in the anonymous continuation of Bacon's New Atlantis, a solid kind of heraldry. These heraldic devices, scattered through the writings and engravings, identified the members and enabled them to recognize each other's work and the locations of important ciphers. The Parnassian symbolism was extended into a kind of alphabet. In this respect, let us quote a few lines from the Laws of the Fraternity of the Rosy Cross by Count Michael Meyer. This German adept, after regretting in several paragraphs that he cannot state clearly the location of the secret meeting place of the Rosicrucian Brotherhood, makes this enigmatic statement: "We cannot set down the places where they meet, neither the time. I've sometimes observed Olympic houses not far from a river and a known city which we think is called Es Spiritus. I mean Helicon or Parnassus, in which Pegasus opened a spring of everlasting water, wherein Diana washed herself, to whom Venus was handmaid and Saturn gentleman usher. This will sufficiently instruct an intelligent reader, but more confound the ignorant." By this and a number of similar references by various authors, it is evident that the Rosicrucian fraternity was identified with the empire of the poets. Michael Meyer visited England about 1616, the year of Shakespeare's death, and it was after his return to Germany that his literary interest in Rosicrucianism was revealed. There is every indication that the Rosicrucian order originated in England, but its manifestos and documents were released in Germany as a matter of precaution. It is possible that Meyer was entrusted with this delicate task. The original Rosicrucian manifestos were issued anonymously, and their only direct connection with the Shakespeare-Bacon controversy is the warning in the Farmer itself that upright, God-fearing citizens should not be deceived by the false pretensions of a certain stage actor left unnamed. Anonymous books offend the natural curiosity of the human being. The Fama and Confessio Fraternitatis and the chemical marriage of Christian Rosenkreuz are now believed to have been written by a quiet, respectable Lutheran theologian named Johann Valentin Andrea. When the tempest broke about this good man's head, he dismissed the whole subject as a youthful prank with no serious intent. Thus relieved of ulterior motive, he proceeded to write a number of other works anonymously, which in one way or another indicated entire seriousness of purpose. His anonymous writings were published, strangely enough, in various parts of the Parnassian region. For example, his Turbo was printed in Helicon Juxta Parnassum. His Menippus originated from Cosmopolis, and his Peregrini in Patria Errores saw light in Utopia. All this sounds very much as though Andrea were a secret citizen of the Parnassian state. These indications tie Rosicrucianism more closely to Bacon's secret society. Figure 1. Title page of the Philostrates of Blaise de Vigenère, 1615. This remarkable engraving represents a secret session of the Society of the Poets in the Temple of the Muses. In the center background, the immortals are gathered on Parnassus, accompanied by Pegasus the winged horse. On the roof of the temple are the two columns which appear on the title page of Bacon's Novum Organum. Here also are the galleries of art and nature, wherein are depicted all things knowable to man. The entire figure abounds in strange symbols for those who have the necessary keys. In the heavens blazes the sun of truth, hidden from the profane by clouds. Figure 2. Lord Bacon in the robes of High Chancellor after the portrait by Virtue. This likeness of his lordship is important because it is one of the few portraits of Bacon in which he is not wearing his familiar high-crowned, broad-brimmed hat. Without the hat, the extraordinary height of his forehead is revealed. The Droeshout portrait of Shakespeare shows the same structure of head, and it is also suggested in the caricature by Beerbohm accompanying this article. The High Chancellor carries the large ornamental purse which contains the Great Seal of England, and his state robes are damasked with the roses of the Tudors and the thistles of the Scottish kings. Figure 3, title page and frontispiece of the Sileniana Augustalia by Johann Valentin Andrea. While there is ample proof that Andrea, the Lutheran divine, was a distinguished theologian and philosopher of his time, portraits of him have given rise to considerable speculation. Andrea is accredited with having written the original documents of the Rosicrucian order. His family arms, upper right, consist of a cross and 4 roses. There is evidence that Bacon made use of Andrea in the furtherance of his secret political and philosophical society. A number of Baconians are of the opinion that Bacon did not die in England, but after his mock funeral retired to the continent, where he lived for a number of years in Germany and Holland, finally passing on at an advanced age. Is the portrait of Andrea, shown here, a picture of Bacon in his 83rd year? Certainly there is a similarity in general appearance if we allow for the inevitable ravages of age. Notice especially the same dome-like forehead and the expression around the eyes. The nose is sharper, but this facial change is usual in old age. Figure 4. The heraldic achievement of the Right Honourable Sir Francis Bacon, Knight, Baron of Verulam, Viscount St. Alban. The principal elements of the coat armour are as follows. Shield quartered, 1st and 4th quarters for the family of Bacon, 2nd and 3rd quarters for the family of Waplode. Crest, on wreath, a boar passant charged with ermine, on flank with crescent gules. Supporters, 2 Roman soldiers, guards of the colony of Verulamium. Motto, mediocria firm, the middle ground is the safest. In terms of heraldry, the bearing of a boar in arms betokeneth a man of bold spirit, skillful and politic in warlike feats, accustomed to hardships, and of that high resolution that he will rather die valorously in the field than secure himself by ignominious flight. The crest is enclosed within a mantle trimmed with ermine and surmounted by the coronet of a viscount. Of special interest to the present article are the Roman soldiers representing the landholdings which support the title. As they represent Lord Bacon's claim to the estates of Verulam, they can be used as symbols of his title, and by extension, of himself. The helmet above the shield signifies nobility, and because it is a protection for the head, it represents also wisdom, which is the proper protection and the peculiar distinction of nobility. This illumination of Lord Bacon's arms was prepared especially for the files of the Philosophical Research Society by Leonard Wilson, Fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. Pegasus stamping upon the earth and bringing forth the spring helicon with his hoof is a favorite motif in the secret heraldry of the hidden empire. In the engraving by Watts, Francis Bacon is shown with a large medallion suspended about his neck on a ribbon. On the medallion is the forepart of a dancing horse. We are reminded of the Shakespearean line, "From love's labour lost, the dancing horse will tell you." It is impossible to tell from the tiny engraving whether or not the horse is Pegasus, and in later reproductions of the figure, the medal is covered, usually with a piece of paper which Bacon holds in his hand. All the testimony points to the fact that Bacon actually created an existing society of unknown philosophers and set up a machinery for perpetuating this society and its principles after his own death and the decease of the members of the original circle. The ideals of the order are revealed through Bacon's New Atlantis. John Hayden, the Rosicrucian apologist, writing about 1660, states simply and clearly that the College of the 6 Days' Work described in the New Atlantis is the Rosicrucian Society. The principal work of the Rosicrucians, according to their original manifestos, was the compilation of the Universal Encyclopedia, the book which was to contain all knowledge necessary to the perfection of man and human society. This mysterious book M is identical in scope and purpose with Bacon's Instauratio Magna, the summary of learning. After a survey of Bacon's principles and a comparison with the objectives of Rosicrucianism, the English Baconian Wigston was moved to the opinion that either two groups were independently working on the same program with an approximately identical degree of ability, or else the two programs were under the direction of one person. The latter assumption is most reasonable, as no other contemporary personality is known to be as well equipped for the task as was Bacon. From Bacon's own writings, from the moral and political implications of the plays attributed to Shakespeare and other contemporary source material, we can reconstruct at least part of the program to which the secret empire of the poets was dedicated. The following may be regarded as indicative. 1. The renovation of all human knowledge to the discovery of causes. Learning must be illuminated from within and its spiritual content released gradually as human capacity expands. 2. The restoration of the mystical and philosophical theology and the purification of religions from the errors and fallacies by which the spiritual revelations of ancient times have been deformed. 3. The renovation and perfection of the arts by which the power of beauty could be released as a culturing and civilizing force. Creative artists have a special responsibility, whether in music, painting, poetry, architecture, or literature. They are the molders of public opinion and the prophets of new ages. Their vision is the intangible foundation upon which practical men must build tangible structures. 4. The political reformation of states toward the philosophic empire. This is the commonwealth of the wise, one people under the sun, united in holy purpose and dedicated to the attainment of all good things possible to the state of man. 5. The creation of a permanent organization dedicated to the attainment of these various purposes and resolved to continue without abatement of effort, without regard for time or circumstances. This society should neither rest nor dissolve itself until the completion of the 6 days' work. 6. The members of this group should remain unknown, accepting outwardly the laws and customs of the nations in which they live. They should at periodic intervals communicate with each other, but should be revealed to the larger body of society only through their works. 7. Their reformation should be orderly and within the boundaries of law, their particular efforts being directed to the reformation of law themselves, to the end that human statutes should be brought into harmony with the universal laws of life and nature. 8. The end of their practice shall be the practice of use. The supreme utility is the use of power for the benefit of private and public good. In the course of its development, the empire of the poets not only perfected its inner government, but at appropriate times created visible bodies of learning to forward its purposes. And these bodies were not necessarily permanent. They were created in moments of emergency, and when they were no longer useful, were dissolved. The principal requirement was that the inner fraternity should remain undiscovered and undiscoverable, and take no obvious part in the intrigues of states. It was an inner over-government which, like the spirit of man, could not actually be perceived, but which gave purpose to the rest. The laws of the Rosicrucians and certain sections of the new Atlantis reveal the method by which the program should be perpetuated. The new Atlantis is, of course, the hidden empire, not something in the distant future, but already existing and emerging through time. Another question naturally arises: did Bacon and his associates actually originate this philosophic scheme? More likely it descended in spirit from the time of Pythagoras and Plato. Bacon's genius was not as creator, but as coordinator. He gathered the fragments of tradition, vitalized them with his own dynamic personality, and set up the machinery to bring about the fulfillment of man's fondest aspiration. Literally, he brought the wits together. By organizing an ideal, he gave it form and substance, and released through it an energy suitable for its completion. From the Fama, we learn that each of the members of the original circle must appoint a successor, and before his death, initiate this successor into the company of the Brotherhood. In this way, the society perpetuated its purposes without the dilution inevitable in a group open to general membership. There is abundant evidence that the Baconian society has survived and still convenes in the shaded Parnassian groves. There is also evidence that the members of the society are conversant with the activities of those exploring the mysteries of the Baconian ciphers. Dr. Owens, who did much of the decoding, stated on one occasion that at a certain point in his researches it seemed to him as though he were the victim of some strange conspiracy. He was blocked on every hand by natural and artificial hazards, and was never able to go beyond a certain point. Open doors closed in his face, and the whole pattern of his life was confused beyond his strength to endure. Other Baconians to the present time have met organized opposition from intangible sources. This does not mean that the opposition was in any way supernatural. The indications were that a powerful group was resolved to prevent the exposure of their activities, and had means available to enforce their objection. There seems no objection to those seeking to disprove Shakespeare's authorship of the plays, nor does the effort to establish claims to the English throne bring serious repercussion. But if the fancy leads toward the secret society which Bacon founded, then comes the deluge. Great changes in nature are effects for each of which there must be an adequate cause. From the time of Bacon to the present day, there has been a strong motion in the body of society toward the creation of an ideal democracy. Is it too much to suggest that this resolute progress against terrific odds bears witness to a well-formulated plan? Is it unreasonable or incredible that at some time an organization of idealists could have come into existence to guide the children of men into the promised land? The idea may at first appear fantastic, but a little thoughtfulness will prove that it is a perfectly natural circumstance in the evolution of the human race. It needed to be done, and it required only the courage and vision to fulfill this necessity. Secret orders have existed since the beginning of human society. In ancient times, such organizations were usually religious. During the medieval and early modern periods, political considerations inspired the creation of lodges, the members of which were bound together by mystic ties. More recently, secret societies have emphasized fraternity and social service. But religious, philosophical, and political considerations are still extant as forces drawing human beings into brotherhoods of secret purposes. The Utopian ideal has influenced individuals and groups since the time of Plato. Most secret organizations are dedicated in part to benevolent works aimed toward the general improvement of mankind. The members of these groups always assume that the body social requires leadership and direction from consecrated persons working together in secret to bring about a general reformation of laws and practices. Most of the important revolutions in man's physical conditions began as the secret convictions of esoteric societies. In the course of time, the vision of the few was communicated to the majority, resulting in the accomplishment of a variety of useful reforms. And now we must return to one of our primary considerations, namely William Shakespeare, who, or more correctly, what is this elusive phantom? Why was he invented? And why has the controversy concerning his existence or non-existence been so carefully nourished? Also, For what reason has his humble estate as the man Will Shakespeare been magnified and embellished in such a particular and significant manner? For example, history refers to the Shakespearean company of actors, yet there is no factual evidence that any such company ever existed. Shakespeare never enjoyed the doubtful honor of being the manager of any group of players, strolling or otherwise. The references to his company can only mean the company to which he belonged. There are also charming engravings of recent invention showing Shakespeare reading his plays or verses at the court of Queen Elizabeth. The poet is represented surrounded by an illustrious assemblage of respectful gentry hanging breathless upon his immortal words. This charming scene appears to have been built the slender circumstances that the company to which Shakespeare belonged received an allotment of bright-colored cloth from which to make capes, in order that they might add color to the gay company which walked in the coronation of James I. In selecting a suitable mask, why choose an actor, probably illiterate, and belonging to the least favored strata of English society, at a time when stage players as a whole were designated vagabonds, and were only permitted legal existence if their companies were attached to the retinue of some noble person? The key to the symbolism is to be found in the basic workings of Lord Bacon's mind. To him, the theatre was the symbol of the world. It is upon this larger stage that each man in his day plays many parts. Bacon's idols of the theatre are the fallacies of learning given the appearance of dignity and respectability by the veneration of the uninformed. False scholarship, a hallowed but hollow appearance, dazzling the mind with a show of wisdom but inwardly devoid of fact. Probably Bacon was thinking of his own alma mater, the ancient and honourable College of Cambridge, from which he parted hastily in his 16th year lest his intelligence be entirely corrupted. In quiet meditation of the human plight, Bacon realized that human beings have built up a false existence upon a foundation of sophistry. Behind the pretensions which passed for scholarship was a profound and universal ignorance. It was all front, a comedy of errors, paper palaces where vagabonds played the parts of kings, uttering high-flown phrases, speaking lines that were not their own, and understanding not a whit of what they spoke. The Rosicrucians made use of a curious symbol, the true meaning of which is exceedingly obscure. This figure is a monkey, sometimes represented wearing spectacles and gravely engaged in reading a massive book, which it holds as it sits in the posture of a scholar. Sometimes the text of the book is inverted. This monkey is the ape of nature, earlier called the ape of Aristotle. The selection of the simian to play this vital role in learning was doubtlessly inspired by the circumstance that the monkey is sort of caricature of man. There is something human in its antics, and its sober little face seems wrinkled with the burdens of the world. Sometimes the ape is represented gazing attentively and quizzically at its own reflection in a mirror, as though doubtful as to the category and nature to which it belongs. In old engravings, the ape may even wear a scholar's cap and gown and preside majestically over an assemblage of the intelligentsia. Were it not for the telltale tail protruding from the hem of the robe, this somber simian might easily pass for the Dean of Letters. Bacon himself associates the ape with the faculty of wit because this little creature is forever engaged in pantomime and mimicry. It seems to be ridiculing the pretensions of mankind. One moment it is gay, and another moment utterly dejected. But there is no evidence that its moods have any meaning, even to itself. It is a creature of appearances from which anything can be implied, but all the implications have no meaning beyond appearances. For Bacon, the ape was the appropriate figure to represent scholasticism, the system of philosophy dominated by the venerated vagaries of Galen and Avicenna, those pillars of Hercules which marked the boundaries of the known world. Was not the theatre then an appropriate symbol of man's phantom empire of opinions? Nothing real but giving the appearance of reality. No one important but the humblest actor seeming to be important if he wore the robes and mask of significance. Perhaps there was a little of bitter irony in this symbolism, something of disillusionment and frustration, but withal much of truth, even if the facts were acid. For all these monkey shines, there was need for a master ape, a creature of appearances, whose outer parts seemed wise and whose simian proportions were skillfully concealed, all but the tail. Methinks we can perceive our ape of learning behind the mask of Shakespeare, whose respectability is draped about him like a scholar's gown. He wears the mask of genius, but like the ghost of Hamlet's father, could a tale unfold. In fact, that tale is of considerable dimension, for it is already 300 years long. Is not the whole controversy around Shakespeare merely intended to keep the tale in view? But there is more and serious business to be considered. Benjamin Disraeli, the father of the illustrious English statesman, was devoted to curiosities of literature. He defined the ape of nature as art. Here, Disraeli has recourse to the old Hermetic speculations. Art is the perfection of nature by intelligence. Bacon defines wisdom as obedience to the laws of nature. Under the general heading of art is summarized all human learning, which is nothing but a discovery of the laws of nature and obedience to those laws. Invention, for example, is not a process of creating, but a process of discovering and applying. Man is forever adapting universals to his own particulars. Man did not invent music. He merely discovered the laws governing harmonics, and every composition must obey those laws or it is displeasing to the composer. Man did not invent medicine. He merely discovered the laws governing health and set up a machinery to adapt those laws to his own requirements. Man did not invent philosophy. He merely beheld a universal pattern and interpreted it in the terms of his personal, moral, and ethical necessities. Claiming all knowledge for himself and setting up his own estate as superior to nature, he is willfully ignoring the fact that he must forever remain merely the servant of inevitables. He survives by adjustment, and in the universal scheme of things can change nothing but himself. He wears the appearance of a god and has elected himself Lord of the world. He speaks with ultimate finality about matters he will never comprehend. He is certain of his every uncertainty and passes judgment upon the certainties and uncertainties of others. He builds great cities, creates empires, and struts about in actors' boots. He grows, he merges, advances, and evolves. He builds industriously an uncertain future upon the footing of an uncertain past. He seeks to set up permanence for himself in an environment forever impermanent. Though forced to the Darwinian conviction of distant kinship with the ape, he convinces himself, if not others, that he has created a magnificent interval of accomplishment between himself and the simian. Man now beholds his own kind in a variety of dignified states. He is emperor, king, and general. He is scientist, artist, and musician. A few have attained to wealth or gained fame in sciences or letters, but regardless of style and the fine quality of vestment. In spite of comforts and conveniences and all these civilizing influences which we worship as proofs of our eternal progress, in spite, indeed, of our cloud-capped towers and palaces, the tale still shows. We still read or appear to read the book of nature, gleaning wisdom from every page through the spectacles we have invented for the purpose. But sad to say, we have not yet discovered that we are holding the book upside down. Perhaps Bacon intended to portray the whole picture of universal fact in the drama of his masks. All knowledge was his province, but he reveals his secret convictions through a variety of appearances. He's the secret master of the theatre, in whom all numbers are perfected. He is the mind behind the front, all things to all men. He is the Apollo, lord of the muses, and in his philosophic empire he has created a population made up of the aspect of himself. These aspects are his apes, and he himself is art, the ape of nature. As Grand Master of his hidden empire, he has set up a world among men patterned after the world in space. He is the lawgiver, the scientist, philosopher, and poet. It should not be inferred from our remarks that Bacon was an egomaniac playing God. Rather, he is part of his own symbolism. He himself is the mask of universals. All men who create play God, for in creating they're merely channels. And in relation to things created, they occupy the highest or central place. Man becomes God by obedience, by the perfect releasing of universals through the personal. No mortal being can do this fully. Perfection for man is relative. Bacon's philosophic commonwealth is merely setting up the eternal pattern in the social state. Through Shakespeare, Bacon simply tells us that drama is the mask of wisdom. Drama is life. In our short-sightedness, we attribute dramatic incident to the invention of circumstances. Life seems to originate in a chaos from which it proceeds to disillusion. Shakespeare becomes a symbol of the whole world of appearances. The inadequate cause, which, if examined, reveals itself to be a phantom, but if accepted without question, masquerades as fact. The obvious is seldom the real. We worship secondary causes because we perceive them more readily. It seldom occurs to us to question whether these secondary causes have sufficient vitality to produce the effects attributed to them. When examined closely, they lead to uncertainty. Here, Bacon could use Shakespeare easily to represent his pet aversion, Aristotle. Aristotle was the ape of Plato, the patron saint of secondary causes. He was forever searching for the physical cause for things and crying out against the indignification of intangibles. Progress emerges from the earth. The beginning of all things is in nature itself, from which all creatures ascend by a long and difficult course of evolution. Darwin was of the same mind. Man rose by refinement from the ape. The devout Shakespearean, perturbed by the absence of evidence to sustain his poet, follows the accepted course of manufacturing evidence, his primary objective being to sustain the status quo of the obvious. This is a common practice in all the arts and sciences. The physical and literal foundations must be protected against that sickly mysticism which would go beyond the physical world to search for the causes of physical things. Shakespeare can stand for the physical cause of almost any physical phenomena. In fact, he is a proper object for the adoration of all materialists. By accepting him as the master dramatist, all the rest is easily explained. There is only one difficulty. Shakespeare himself cannot be explained. Thus, smugness is preserved by ignoring that which conflicts with itself. Life is drama, the stage is the world, and Shakespeare is the accident which explains everything. We say that Shakespeare is the accident because, like all accidents and coincidences used to solve unsolvables, his whole career is a fabric of accidents. There is neither rhyme nor reason in the man, yet we assume that he gives both rhyme and reason to the plays. Unschooled, he becomes the patron of scholarship. Uncultured, he becomes the monument of culture. Inadequate, he becomes the fountain of adequacy. Perverse in all his characteristics, he emerges as the paragon of virtue. Bacon had the wit to see the circumstance and knew that, in extremity, the human mind, at battling to preserve its own status quo, would have resort to the supreme concept of accident genius beyond time and place. Theology, confronted with the same dilemma, takes refuge in providence, which is a genius apart from reason. This is the sovereign wisdom of that which is obviously absurd, or so to say, that which surpasseth understanding. Lord Bacon would tell us that genius, like all other natural phenomena, must originate in adequate causes. There is no exception in things exceptional. Where evidence is inconsistent with fact, it is because we have not hitched the effect to its proper cause. If solutions do not solve, it is because they are not solutions in spite of indications to the contrary. By the intriguing device of the plays, Bacon can give us a valuable lesson in the weighing of evidence concerning the adequacy of causes. To unravel his riddle, we should become aware of the riddle of the whole world. The struggle of the human mind to overcome appearances and establish rationale of values is the greater part of learning. Yet we cling to a fond belief in accidents because in some way it offers personal hope and consolation. If greatness is an accident, there is still a chance that we may become great in spite of ourselves rather than because we have builded wisely toward greatness. Bacon would have frustrated his own purpose had he locked the Shakespeare personality completely within the cipher. So ingenious was his mechanism that he could well have devised an impenetrable disguise, but this would have profited nothing. The purpose of a cipher is to conceal and yet reveal. The concealment may protect a secret writing from all unacquainted with a certain set of rules. For example, Julius Caesar used a cipher as a means of communicating his commands during war. He wound a strip of paper in a spiral around his baton and wrote along the junction of the spiral coils. He then dispatched the paper to the required officer. Only the man who had a baton the same as his could recover the secret writing by adjusting the paper to his own. All ciphers are legible to those for whom they are intended, but for the rest they are meaningless. Imagine a man placing in his writings a code to be discovered by persons unknown in some future age. This required a combination of elements. Certain traces must be left, as it were, a tail hanging alt, to stimulate curiosity. On the other hand, this curiosity must not lead to an easy discovery. For like all human inquiry, it must be perfected by diligence. Clues must lead to other clues, and especially there must be blind clues, leads that lead nowhere. Still, there must be hope, or the decipherer becomes discouraged. There must also be quality to the message by which the mind, having solved part, would proceed with the rest. How should such a method be devised? To a man of Bacon's mind, the answer was obvious: copy nature. Nature itself is a mass of clues, indications, and intimations leading through long and devious complications to the light of truth. If a cipher is set up, patterned upon natural law, whoever solves the cipher solves the mystery of his own existence. One is the symbol of the other. The cipher is Bacon's method, the missing key to his reformation of the world. I do not mean that the cipher conceals the secret. Rather, the cipher itself is the secret. It shows how nature unfolds toward cause and how the arts and sciences are in fact themselves ciphers concealing a hidden meaning under circumstances and appearances. The key to the cipher is therefore the inductive method by which all the riddles in nature may be resolved. Bacon wrote the key in his epitaph, "Let all compounds be dissolved." The cipher is the compound, the master key to a master mind. The true reading of the hidden message depends upon a patient weighing of evidence and a constant elimination of long treasured non-essentials. The end of the code is the knowledge of hidden causes. The code apparently leads to Bacon, but his life, his work, and his writings are parables grounded in hidden causes. It is a larger riddle concealed in a smaller one. All answers, when discovered, become insufficient and demand larger answers. Even when the mind reaches Bacon himself, the end is not attained. Bacon is Chancellor of Parnassus, a high priest in the Temple of the Muses, but behind him is the greater universal pattern represented by the god Apollo, the principle of light. Appearances lead to accidents, facts lead to law. William Shakespeare is an illusion made to appear factual. He is therefore the world itself, the empty substance of a dream, the apex of mortal pessimism. This is a drama of shadow and substance, illusion and reality, matter and mind, accident and law. Behind the masks is the Society of Hermetic Adepts, the unknown philosophers. The trail leads to them, and through them it ascends along the links of the golden chain which binds earth to heaven. The upper end of the chain is bound to the throne of Zeus, and the lower end to the wrist of the ape. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.